Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So, we got to talk about this new liberal plan. Wow. I've got the outline of it laid out here in front of me. So, first, conservatives, hold your laughter till the end. I don't want anybody making my jokes before I get to them. Liberals, oh, we got to talk about this. I'm going to go through an overview of it, and then I'm going to hit a couple things in detail. Then I'm going to burst some bubbles. Okay? But I need you to stick with me. Okay, so the first part of the plan, we're going to cut the pay of the military by 15%. We're going to employ 3 million people to do hippie conservationist work, planting trees and cutting paths on parks, that sort of thing. Whole bunch of money for renewable energy, hydroelectric dams. There's the railway project. We're going to pay artists to create 2,500 paintings and 17,000 sculptures. And I guess we're going to decorate public buildings with them or something. I don't know. That's not actually in the plan. There's a whole section on employee rights, one of which we're going to come back to. There's a section on strengthening unions. They're going to buy 10 million acres of farmland and turn it into parks and preserves. There's new entitlement programs for the old, the sick, the blind, kids, anybody who wants a handout. There's a whole new section and a whole new way of doing public housing, because that's worked out so well for us. But the big one in the employee rights section is a living wage, like a real living wage, like the one everybody's been talking about. Yeah, it's in there. Basically, it's guaranteeing that anybody who's working in the United States earns a decent living. The guy who drafted this, he's on record as saying that no business that pays less than a living wage has any right to continue to exist in the United States. Wow. that is, I guess if you support that kind of thing, you would call this ambitious. Everybody else would probably call it expansive. I'm not going to talk about the economic impact of this. I'm sure there's probably already 100 videos on YouTube talking about that. I want to talk about it in a different way. Can you imagine what people throughout American history would think of this plan? Can you imagine what the guys who hoisted the flag on Iwo Jima and stormed the beaches at Normandy, can you imagine what they would do to this guy if they caught him? They'd vote him into office for a 4th term. This isn't a new plan, this is the New Deal. So after that last video, conservatives were mad at me. Apparently, they have laid claim to the men who stormed the beaches at Normandy. And we certainly shouldn't equate them to any kind of liberal. And looking back, you're right. They're nothing like the modern liberal. This is straight socialism. It is. And this isn't even all of it. These were just the highlights I picked out that I could remember. Yeah. So the modern American conservative is living with a myth. And it's a myth created by Hollywood. See, when you want to make a war movie, who's going to go watch it? Right-wingers, right? Those are the guys, really love to watch that stuff. When you watch a movie, do you want the characters to be completely unrelatable? No, of course not. You want them to be like you. So Hollywood made them like them. And that created the myth. And the myth is that all of these men that were part of the greatest generation, those that stormed the beaches at Normandy, well, they were all conservatives. The reality, more than half of them voted for this dude. It's a myth. It is a myth, and it's a myth that just won't die, apparently. So let's talk about some other things, just to make sure that the point gets across. What about bigotry? I mean, it was the 40s, of course there was bigotry. But what about among the men that stormed the beaches at Normandy? 1945, the war ended. There was some rumbling in the ranks. 1948, 3 short years later, oh, the military's desegregated. Why? Because when you actually put your rear on the line and you're getting shot at, skin tone really doesn't matter that much anymore. Dude's got the same uniform I got on. We're on the same team. Nothing like the American conservative of today. What about refugees? After World War II? After World War II. This is after the fighting is over. So these people would be what the American conservative of today would call an economic refugee. They're not fleeing violence. Oh, they took hundreds of thousands of them. And then when they just couldn't take any more, you think they turned the military? Did we use our military to stop them from coming? Put them on the border? Put flotillas out? No, we helped them move. The U.S. Navy, just between Europe and Australia, ran more than 150 voyages moving refugees. Nothing like the modern American conservative. The Greatest Generation was great, not because they stormed the beaches at Normandy. They were great because they were fearless. Yeah, they were fearless when they were facing a machine gun nest on Utah Beach. But they were also fearless when it came to new technology and new ideas. That made them great. The other thing that made them great is that they cared about each other. See, they had been through hard times during the Depression. They'd seen suffering. And then, during World War II, they saw suffering. And when you see it for yourself, it tends to change your perspective on things. At least it should, if you're human. So, no, the conservatives in the U.S. do not get to lay claim. Just remember, they're sitting there smoking their Lucky Strikes in that photo, holding their Thompsons, foot on a dead Nazi, M1 in the air. Half the dudes in that photo voted for this. Straight socialism. No. The modern American conservative does not get to lay claim to this because, let's see, environmental protection, conservation, mass transit, arts, employee rights, unions, entitlement programs, public housing, living wage. They're literally trying to destroy all of it. They're nothing like them. Nothing. It's a myth. It is a myth. Living with a myth. And while we're on the topic of myths, because I know this is going to come up, well, you know FDR did X, Y, and Z. I mean, it could be a list. He did a lot of bad things. Yep, he did. He did. See, this here, what we're talking about is American history. American history is populated by people, and people are flawed. People make mistakes. People do bad things. Some of what FDR did is bad in hindsight, bad by today's standards. Some of it was pretty horrible by the standards of the day. Yeah, all that's true. They voted for him 4 times. 4 times. American leaders are not perfect. That's another myth. We're talking about American history. If you want to talk about infallible leaders or how all World War II veterans were super conservative, you need to go over to the American mythology section, because that's where you're going to find that, because it's not backed up by fact. It's not true. Socialism took on a nasty connotation in the United States during the Cold War. Prior to that, literally, the only president elected 4 times. Anyway, just remember, fearless is what made the greatest generation great. I can assure you, they would not hide behind a wall and cower behind a wall because they were afraid of some men, women, and children looking for a better life. These are men who left cover and charged unprotected towards machine gun nests. Now, they are nothing like the American conservative of today. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good night.